Welcome back to Paint Society. I'm Brian, and on this episode, we've got a big, complete pearl paint job on this beautiful Lexus. Now, when this vehicle came in, it did have some scratches all along all the panels except for the roof and the bumper. So the way that we attack this is we're gonna be using a 320 grit. Now, I've got this fancy little DA block that we went and blocked out every single scratch. And since they were just very minor scratches, but not minor enough to polish out, we were able to just sand them down without any sort of filler, and then we can use our primer. Now, by using our primer, what that's going to do is that's going to fill in that 320 scratch and give us a paintable surface. So once that's all done, then it's all sanded. It's ready to get back into the spray booth, and that's exactly what we have going on here. So we're going to share some tips along the way that are going to help you with any paint job, especially this big paint job right here. And here's what we're working with today. Now, we're not gonna seal this because it's 600 grit sanded, and basically all of the panels are going to be getting base and pearl. There's no reason to try to do any sort of blending within here. We're just gonna go all the way down with our color, all the way across the hood with our color, and that way we have one uniform color along the whole entire vehicle. So we're not going to use white sealer on this, again, because it's already been prepped up to 600 and it's already primed with white, so it's going to cover very well. Now, sealer still is always a good candidate in case you have a little bit of burn through here and there to the base, which won't lie, there are a couple burn throughs here and there to the base, but those will be just easily covered with some white paint. You don't want to go too wet on those because you don't want any sort of reaction. So on your first coat, what we're going to do is just take it light and easy. Let's go ahead and get that base coat all ready so we can start to put it in, and we'll show you what guns we're using today. And that's what's going to make up this color for the base, just white, yellow, and black. We still have to add our binder and our reducer, and we're going to do a mix of those two with extra slow and slow. We'll mix them up 50-50 so it lays smooth but doesn't take all day to dry. And after some mixing, this is what it looks like. These are cool. These are little Colad mixer sticks, and they're plastic so they don't absorb the toner like wood. So if you had a wood stick and you put it right into there, it would absorb all that toner that you might need, at least maybe a couple grams at that if it's really porous, the wood stick. And that will take the toner right out of the mix. So plastic, it won't do that. It just keeps putting it back into the mix. And it's got these little holes in there so it mixes a little bit better. So yeah, these are pretty cool. I'll put these in the description as well for you guys. Just little things that you might not know you need it until you actually use it. And today we're going to be using the Wacom, our 360, and this is the Motivated Painters Edition. I love these guns because they're super light. I mean, you cannot go wrong with this Wacom, to be honest with you guys. So we're going to go ahead and load her up and start applying to the primer. I'm going to show you some tips inside the booth. Now, before we get started on the base, I got myself a brand new tack rag that I let air out. That's something you always want to do when you're doing a white car. Grab a brand new tack rag. Any sort of contamination or residue left on an old tack rag, even if it's only used once, is going to transfer to white. White shows everything, believe it or not. So I got my neutralizer. This is an anti-stag gun, and it's not necessary, but it does help. And as I mentioned earlier in other videos, well, this is only for plastic, right? Well, no, not really. It neutralizes the vehicle. I got plastic right here. This is going to attract dust, dirt particles, that type of thing. So I'm neutralizing the whole vehicle so that any of that dust, it doesn't fall off of this plastic and then come onto the panel itself. I've had great success when doing big jobs using this combination by tacking just like this. Basically, what I'm going to do here and how I'm going to attack this is I'm going to most likely attack it from one end and move it over and go all the way around and come back. We really want to keep that wet edge, and I want to kind of start from the front and move towards the exhaust. So we're going to see what works. I'm not saying what I'm telling you is going to be the best way right away because I don't know that. You have to learn your vehicle. And to tell you guys, I'm not always a little bit anxious or nervous about a job like this. It's just the way it is. There's always that little pounding of the heart right before you spray the clear, or that little nervousness, but that's what makes the job even better. So even pro painters, we go through the same thing. You know, we don't want to mess it up. So we got our Wacom here. we'll go ahead and lay down some base on all of the primer marks, and then we'll keep it moving. That first coat went down pretty good. You can see the coverage is pretty nice. We can still see on camera just a little bit of shadowing of the primer coming through, and that's normal. We don't want to get it completely covered in the first coat with white. White does not cover easy. We know that, so let's just get some paint on there, because remember, we didn't seal it and we don't want any flare-ups. Now, something interesting I'm going to be doing around here, I kind of still want this area to match up here. So I'm not necessarily going to be taking paint too much up here if I can help it, because I don't want these colors, even though they're split by like a big molding, I don't want to look like two different colors when you look at the car from afar. All right, so kind of keep these things in mind. Also over here, we want to try to keep our color down so that we can try to preserve the two colors here. I got base on my primer area, will allow this to flash. And in the next coats, what I'm going to be doing is just covering the whole entire vehicle. We can still have some hiding issues over in this area. As far as the rear bumpers are concerned, something I've been doing lately just to make sure they match, and I haven't had any issues we've tested, is we're just putting the sensors in, we take out the little rubber, and then we paint over them, and everything matches, and we haven't had any issues. You just can't overload the paint on those. So what I do is I sand them down just a little bit with 600, take off some of the old paint so we don't overload it and that the sensor works properly. First coat's all dried up. Now the one thing with white you want to do is let it dry, because white is going to be a little bit harder to cover if you start putting multiple coats on it before it flashes. Now it's got a foundation we can build on top of it. So this next coat is going to be the full thing, the full top to bottom, kind of keeping it away from here, and that should cover it enough. So let's roll into it. And here's the pearl, and we got to be careful because this has just a little bit of silver in the mix. So when we spray it, it's not just like a regular pearl that's just going to look nice. We got to make sure that we're trying to walk the panel as well as possible, spraying it wet. In this mix, I put full extra slow, so it goes on smooth, it lands nice, it has time to dry properly. And this is what the pearl looks like. It's going to darken it up just a little bit. We're going to put 2 coats on it. We're going to be using the same spray gun. We've got it all cleaned out. We're going to put 2 coats, and we're going to put them basically back to back. So the flash time is actually going to be the time it takes to get around the vehicle. So by the time I start here, which by the way is something that I'm liking, and here's the reason why, and I told you in the beginning of the video you might change it up. This is the smallest part of the vehicle where 2 panels meet. So if I carry this all the way around from the side all the way up to the front and back around, the only area that I really need to melt back in is this small area right here. So I'm not asking the paint to melt back into a large panel if I, let's say, start in the middle and work all the way back around and come back in here and try to melt it in here. No, I'm only asking the paint to melt it in here. And let's say it's just a touch dry because it's been kicking too long, then we can always buff it. But we're using very slow product on here. It's gonna stay wet. Temperature's not too bad today. So that is what I found to be most effective right now. So I got my gallon there that's helped me out. This is just a little bit too high. Going across the hood. Always fun. So I've been letting the base dry for a good 20 minutes with some heat. You want this base to really be dry, all right? If it's not dry, you're gonna see it later in the clear coat. You're gonna see a little solvent pop, all right? So this thing looks pretty smooth. It's got like a little bit of a sheen to it, and that's what you want, all right? I got my 5-gallon pails ready to go, set up. So I think that we're gonna be good here. We're using a slow clear coat. So that's really gonna help everything melt in. I also taped off the leading edge of the hose about 3 feet so we don't get any black specks or anything into the paint. My first coat is not gonna be super wet. I'm probably gonna go panel by panel. That works the best for me. I have a problem walking it with clear coat, so let's roll. Here she is after one coat, not completely wet, not completely dry, a little dry in this area, not going crazy. This is a big boy, you know, to keep it wet. It's not exactly easy, but the hood we got wetted out, which I wanted to do. The sides I'm not worried about. I don't want to wet those out too much on the first coat because it could run. But the hood, it looks really good. I'm happy with that because this is what I really want to be wet. It's the focal point of the whole vehicle, and you don't have to worry about running it too much if you lay it down. The sides, we're gonna get it a little bit more wetter here. Now, what I did add to the next batch of clear coat is a little bit of extra slow reducer. That's really gonna keep it completely wet. This is a big boy to keep one gigantic run or one gigantic wetness all the way around. So that extra slow, just a pinch of it, I mean 5% is gonna help me out a little bit, help loosen it up. We're gonna go with supersonic speed, let's go. And we're here, guys, the next day, and she is looking pretty good. I'm happy to see no dieback and no runs. Everything's looking really good. We have no buildup. This is such a big project to do, and I'm not a production painter. I'm not like Candyman or Gunman or a lot of those guys that follow me that just paint day in and day out. You guys have a little bit more of the knowledge of how to get around these vehicles. But this was a great learning experience for me. And I gotta say, it came out good. Now, I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna buff it. I will buff it just lightly, maybe a little 2000 here and there. But actually, you know, it's got a pretty good texture for a factory finish. But I could smooth out just a couple areas and make it that much better. But I'm really happy, honestly, with the way that everything looks. Well, in the booth, but I really want to see it outside. So let's get this thing unmasked. This took about a good hour to mask up with a buddy. But let's get this thing unmasked. Let's check it out outside and we'll see how well it looks. Well, I'm just finishing up on this beautiful Lexus, and I'm going to tell you there's going to be more jobs like this coming to my YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe to Paint Society. Now, we did use a couple different guns. You saw us use the Wacom initially, and I love that because it atomizes the paint so well, and that's a super lightweight gun, and to get around this type of vehicle with a big cup, it can get tiresome. There was a couple moments where I had to just stop for a moment and just rest my arm in my hand. I don't have that muscle to be able to just keep on moving. It's just something that I guess you acquire as you paint more bigger vehicles. So hopefully maybe I'll get there at one point. But we did use the WS400 Series 2. Now the reason why I like the WS400 Series 2 and the WS400 in general is because it has such a fine atomization. And when you're painting this vehicle, you get snowblind, and snowblind meaning you don't know what is what. So thankfully, I painted in the dark for many years in my parents' garage, in tents, and I know the muscle memory is you just keep on moving along. And not to say it's going to be perfect at first, but you can go back, you can check, and you can always spot it in. But again, that WS400, and sometimes losing focus of where you're at, it doesn't put on such a thick coat, so you don't have to worry too much about running it, because it's going to put it on nice and wet. Medium wet coats is what you want when you're doing this type of job. We're going to pull this one out. I'll have you guys check it out in the sun. I'm going to look out in the sun with you guys for the first time. But guys, this is Brian from Paint Society reminding you, don't overthink it. It's just paint. I'll see you guys on the next episode.